Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sadiq Abukari. I am the Event Director and the Education Platform Director, New Jersey Chapter for American Hindu Coalition, AHC. We are a nonpartisan, non-profit advocacy organization committed to the prosperity, safety, and strengthening of America. Before we begin this discussion, I have one important question to ask the parents in every community. Do you approve the hijacking of your parental prerogative by the current administration? If not, now is the time to wake up. Consider the following headlines. Murphy signs another dangerous school bill into law. New Jersey schools are expanding their sex education curriculum for 8th graders. New Jersey passed bill for sex education in kindergarten. That is a law now. Children as young as 5 now forced to have diversity and inclusion lessons in New Jersey schools. Toms River parents tell board to say no on sex ed. Ladies and gentlemen, do I have your attention now? On March 2021, legislation A4454 was signed into law by the Murphy administration. That document listed several aspects of inclusion, but also instructs school to incorporate culturally sensitive topics such as sex ed, gender identity, and gender expression into the curriculum for K-12 students. We have with us today 5 panelists, who I'm going to introduce right now. We have Ms. Punit Kaur, that's panel number 1. We have Miriam Gandor, Nikki Awale, and Rosie Takar, and myself as the 5th one. Also joining us on this discussion is Jack Ciattaralli, our future governor of New Jersey. Jack, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I also want to introduce Preeti Pandya Patel, who is the Director of South Asian Outreach for the Ciattaralli campaign, and she has been very instrumental in making this platform happen for all of us. Thank you, Preeti, for all your help.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel discussion on a very important topic. As a gubernatorial candidate going up and down the state of New Jersey for the past 22 months, you can't help but hear the cries of parents all throughout the states, in all communities, their concerns over our public school educational curriculum. What concerns them greatly is a lack of participation in the community with regard to laws that have been passed, some of which were passed right in the middle of the pandemic, when people were terribly distracted by the pandemic and didn't have an opportunity to participate in public debate. And yet, legislation was signed into law by the governor, and very specifically with regard to subject matter being taught at very, very early ages, which I consider to be a bit of an infringement upon parental rights. And so I'm very concerned, and I share those concerns. Melinda and I are married 27 years now, and our 4 children are all in their 20s. But that does not mean, as the governor of New Jersey, that I don't hear the cries of parents from around the state. And when I say all communities, I mean all communities up and down the state with regard to these changes to the public school curriculum. So I look forward to today's discussion with regard to our feelings about the repeal of certain laws and getting our public school curriculum, as I like to say, back on track in teaching critical life skills to our students, our children, and leaving certain other subject matter, as I always like to say, to the kitchen table between parents and their children, especially at the younger ages. Let us be clear. We are not opposed to the appropriate kind of sex education curriculum, particularly in our high schools. We're talking about something entirely different. And that is the focus of today's discussion.
I'm going to introduce each panelist. If you could just give us a little introduction about yourself. And then I'm going to ask you a question after that. So please introduce yourself. This is Mr. Punitji, Mrs. Punitji.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Punit Kaur. I'd like to begin by saying that I'm extremely grateful to be a part of this panel today. I'm a Sikh American, and I'm beyond honored to represent my community today. Just a little bit about myself. I have a background in nonprofit management. I'm currently a board member in the UPenn Alumni Association and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I've been successfully running my window treatment business here in New Jersey. I'd like to express my concern about the grave consequences of the gender identity and sexual orientation being taught from a couple different perspectives. My first perspective will be as a mother of a 4-year-old who goes to kindergarten next year. So she and I, my daughter and I, are facing this first person as a parent and as a child, as a student. A 5-year-old child who does not know how to tie her shoelaces, who cannot differentiate between good or bad. How do you expect a 5-year-old brain to decode and understand all of that? Also, I'd like to express my concern about the dinner table conversations between older siblings, grandparents that are bound, that my child is bound to bring home. How do I handle all of that? My second perspective is as a concern as a former educator. I've been a teacher in the charter school system for 4 years. So I questioned the governor as to why are the educators in the line of fire? Did anyone keep the teachers in loop when all of this framework was being laid out, when this big decision was being taken? Imagine the plight of the educators when they will be inundated by the array of questions asked by these little curious minds. Trust me, I've been there, right? How do you expect the educators to handle that chaos? And lastly, I'd like to conclude by saying that if we have control over, parental guidance over even the movies, what our kids watch, why are we kept away? Why are we excluded from participating in deciding what and when our children will learn what they need to learn? I will end my part by saying that this law is nowhere a testament of inclusion. It's all things exclusion. Thank you.
Penn Alumni Association and the DNE committee. Being a board member of such a reputable school, how do you think this will be a consequence? What would be the consequence of this law?
As an honored member of the DEI committee in the UPenn Alumni Association, I've learned a thumb rule that diversity and inclusion go hand in hand. You can't separate one from another. So as a repercussion or a consequence of the bill, to answer the question of the law rather, we will have to explain inclusion to the kids. And to explain inclusion, we need to tell them what diversity is. Now that's too much information for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. Not only would this impact their psychology, it'll overwhelm and confuse them. At this level, all they need to know is to include everyone and not be being tangled by the labels. Thank you.
When you become governor, what is your action plan for this law? What would you like to do?
Well, I've said all along that I, as governor, will not support the teaching of things like gender ID and sexual orientation in kindergarten. And I do believe that if we want to promote inclusivity, the best way to do that is to teach the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you.
Yes.
Teach our children what Martin Luther King taught my generation. Judge people by the content of their character, not by their physical attributes. And I always like to remind people that the first 27 words of our Declaration of Independence and Constitution are something we don't teach our children today, but yet I think are very, very relevant to this discussion. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, that's a lesson plan that children of all ages can comprehend, that children of all ages can grasp, a lesson plan that all parents would be agreeable to. And so I look to repeal the law that teaches gender ID and sexual orientation in kindergarten, that also teaches certain sexual content in very early ages, as young as 12, and again, to promote inclusivity in a different kind of lesson plan.
Thank you so much. Our next panelist, we have Miriam. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Miriam Gandor. I'm representing the Coptic Orthodox Church in New Jersey, my community. I'm a wife of 18 years to my husband Jim, and mother of 2 boys, 16 and 13. I also work as a marketing director for over 20 years now in our family business based here in New Jersey. Why I'm here? This is a great opportunity. My son is new to the public school system. For elementary school, he attended a Catholic school in town and graduated with a small group of 35 kids. In his new high school, he is one of over 700 freshmen in a school of over 3,000 students. It's a whole new world. I thought it would be a good idea to put him in a public high school to prepare him for public institutions and eventually university. What a rude awakening. In my son's first week of school as a freshman, he came home and told me about a survey his English teacher gave him. The first question on the survey was, how do you identify yourself? He, she, or they? He didn't understand the question. So he asked the teacher, what does this mean? So she looked at him and just laughed and said, just circle he. I asked him, when he came home and told me about it, I asked him, what class was that for? He said, English. English, you ask, what kind of books do you like to read, or how's your writing, or something academic. I was shocked and I was stunned and angry, and immediately I had regrets for putting my son into a public school. I was upset that questions like that were directed to him and not asked of me. As you know, with any incoming school, you fill out a multitude of forms. This question was never on any of those forms. I asked the teacher about that question, and she said that she wanted her classroom to be a safe place that is inclusive. I understand that by default, schools are inclusive. Schools are accepting of everyone. There are already anti-bullying laws in place. School is a safe place. When did sexuality, gender identity, sexual orientation become mainstream words and a key part of our children's academic environment? Additionally, if you're a parent, and think about this for a second, it is frightening if your 14-year-old child is struggling with something like gender or sexual identity. Wouldn't you, the parent, want to know? And does the teacher's desire to be inclusive override my right as a parent? I attended and participated in my local Board of Ed meeting, which was fruitless at face value, but it was eye-opening. I learned that the Board of Education is powerless. They do not represent the vast majority of parents or students, nor do they have any say in the laws that are being passed in Trenton. The bills introduced and the laws being passed are all happening in Trenton, and that's why I'm here today. When I was a 9th grader in high school, my school sent home a form to my parents to sign. It stated that the nurse would give us that talk. It was a permission slip that gave my parents the right to accept or refuse that the school would share certain sensitive information, and it was simple biology. It was about how your body worked and how to protect it and how men and women were different. It was science. How and when did we get from there to here? How did the curriculum go from teaching high school freshmen, and now in today's world, middle schoolers, about their reproductive organs, to exposing kindergartners to ideas about sex and sexuality, overtly with images and without prior knowledge or consent of the parents? How and on whose watch did we get to a point where a child who may be going through gender dysphoria would be able to talk to a school teacher or a staffer without the knowledge of a parent? Your sick child couldn't even get a Tylenol at school without your parents' consent, without a parent's consent. And yet, the state has given the schools the right to intervene on something as serious as a gender identity crisis. That, to me, is mind-boggling. And what is equally mind-boggling is how a majority of constituents, a minority, buy into this ideology, and yet somehow bills are introduced to Trenton and laws are passed that promote not only a liberal agenda, but also they influence our curriculum, an academic curriculum. Mr. Jack Ciattaralli nailed it. You nailed it when you said this. I hear from parents across the state, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, who are angry that extremists like Governor Murphy are infringing on their rights as parents to educate their children about life's most personal and intimate topics, and then trying to shame them when they dare to speak up. That, in a nutshell, is exactly what's happening today. If the average parent had any idea of what changes were being made to the curriculums and what kind of explicit material young children were being exposed to, there would be a massive uproar from parents across the state.
Jack, Miriam brings up a very good point. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, this is the story that I've heard time and again over the past 22 months as a candidate for governor. And it's heartbreaking each time, particularly for those people that have come to this country and believe in the public education system, particularly for people that pay high property taxes, that at the very least want to have a public education system they can have complete confidence in every single way. And you hear these stories, and it's heartbreaking. It's as heartbreaking to hear it today, and it was as heartfelt today as the first time that Marion experienced it. And this is what needs to change. This is what's wrong today with our public education. So let me repeat. We're going to get back under Governor Ciattaralli to teaching critical life skills. Yes. That's what you expect from your public school system. And these other subject matters should be left for parents to address with their children at the appropriate time. Melinda and I are married 27 years, have 4 children. They all developed at a different pace. No 2 children are the same. There may be some conversations that a 14-year-old can handle that some 16-year-olds cannot handle. Right. And that's why it should be left to the discretion of parents. And we need to stop having a school system and legislation that infringes upon that very sacred parental right.
Thank you. So, Miriam, did that answer your question?
Yes. Yes, very much. And I'm extending my support to Jack Ciattaralli for governor. And we pray for him, we wish him success, we are behind him, and I couldn't be more proud of his conviction and commitment to our state, our children, and our future. I mean that sincerely.
And so now we have somebody else on our panel. And, you know, since this is a very diverse audience, we have today the CEO of Lord and Nikki's and the host of the annual Nigerian Independence Celebration and the host of Women Voices Around the Globe. I understand that you have a question, Nikki, so please.
It's a pleasure meeting you and the ladies, and I'm glad that you are here. All of us are here, women. Now, I'm coming from the point of morals. As a host and an event planner, I put together International Dinner Night, all because I want every one of us to know that we are even though we are different, we can unite with our differences. We can still accommodate each other. And I'm representing the Women Voices Around the Globe, which is a talk show on a TV station. Now, I want to ask you as a mother, before when my kids were in school, we used to have PTO, we used to have consent form before things are done, even in schools. And I was privileged to be one of the parents that will go to school early in the morning to meet with the teachers in the school before things are even done in that school. Parents of the Month forever. And I was grateful and honored to be part of that in my children's life. Now, I want to ask the question, what happened to parents' consent before things are done? And what happened to the Charity Begins at Home, where parents are allowed to train their children with their own beliefs, first and foremost? Kindergarten kids, is there anything that we can do differently about this? Because I don't think any woman will stand for that. And I want us to, I'm speaking on behalf of that. Women are saying what can be done differently. Thank you.
There's a couple of things that I find very disturbing about the changes that have been made to the public school system. And before we get to the parental consent, this kind of legislation that was passed totally ignores the fact that New Jersey is the most diverse state in the country. And because of all that diversity, which I believe gives us a certain power and beauty, it means that there can be very, very different viewpoints in the community depending on what ethnic group you're with, what culture is practiced. And therefore, this kind of change at the time that it was proposed should have had a very, very extensive, comprehensive public discussion with work groups all around the state as to what changes, if any, should have been made to our public school curriculum specific to the topics we're talking about today. That discussion did not take place. In fact, many school boards will tell you that they were very disappointed that when the Murphy administration promulgated this legislation, it didn't even give guidance to school districts as to how these topics should be addressed or taught. And if you talk to teachers, they will express their own disappointment and for some displeasure in having to address this topic in the classroom. This isn't what they went to college to teach. So parental consent kind of went out the window with public discussion. And it's been forced upon us, which makes the whole thing all the more insulting. And so I believe any kind of change of this nature, something this dramatic, something this impactful, should have had a very, very large public discussion first before it was ever implemented. But again, in a state as diverse as New Jersey, every ethnic group has to have participation in that public discussion, and that didn't take place. This is a very, very heavy-handed approach, which I find insulting. Governor Murphy is someone that believes that government must demonstrate that it can solve everything by controlling everything. That's not what the American way is all about. It's about public participation. It's about having a role. It's about having a voice. And with regard to these changes to our public school system, we did not.
But you are here. What are your concerns?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rosie Takar, and thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak on the matter that concerns me a lot. I have been successfully managing a travel and tour company. While doing that, I always participated while my kids were in different classes, different schools, as well as when they were in high school. I participated on the PTSA board. I was on the Special Education PTA board, as well as finally, I was in the President's Advisory Board in Drexel University. So I have seen from both ends. I have seen while we were discussing different aspects where we can be helpful to our kids, what exactly are we doing for kids, and then I see as a parent as well. Good point, Preeti, thank you. Yes, I have a 27-year-old son and a 22-year-old daughter. They are done with school? Yes, of course they are. They're even done with college. Then what am I doing here? This matter is much, much bigger than just me, my family, my son, my daughter. I represent a lot of people here. I speak for a lot of people here today. So I can tell you that although they're done with this, doesn't mean that this does not concern me. Soon I'll be a grandma, maybe down the road, 3 years, 4 years, and I will come back in the same circle. So anything that we decide today is going to affect my grandkids day after tomorrow. So yes, I'm here. Now, one thing it really bothers me that the school standard teaching gender identity and sexual orientation to a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old is a matter of concern for all of us. A room full of 20 students who are that young, who come from different cultures, different background, different values, they're so innocent. First of all, you're taking away their innocence. And then you're implementing all these things. You're trying to teach them all of this without taking permissions from the parents, without letting the parents know what they are being taught about. Forget all that. I don't know how I will prepare myself if tomorrow my grandchild comes to me and says, well, I was taught this thing, what does this mean? How am I prepared to answer those questions, those awkward, concerning, confusing questions? Now, it confuses me because these are the kids. They are 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. They do not know the difference between flowers. They're still trying to understand what roses are, tulips are, what is the difference between different flowers, and you're going to teach them about gender equality? Come on. I mean, there has to be something, there is something not right with this equation. So what do? Can we fix this? These are the students who do not know how to choose between healthy and unhealthy food, and you are going to teach them difference between gender identity and gender assigned at birth. I'm confused. There is something that we need to fix, we need to address. Now, we have to understand that the 6-year-old, 7-year-old, do they really know their own identity? Do they really need to be told all this? Why can't families sit together and let this be a conversation between a mother and a daughter, mother and a son? And maybe I have 2 different kids, and what I think is all kids at that age, when they grew up, when they were born, not all the kids learned how to crawl at the same age. They didn't learn they were not teething at the same age. They did not learn how to walk at the same age, but hello, here we are, we giving them this curriculum where they're supposed to come up, learn everything with all the different meanings. How is that even possible? Now, it should be at the discretion of families, at the discretion of the individuals. They should have the power to decide when, how, when are they ready, how do I tell them? It should be for the families to decide, not the government to decide. And definitely not the teachers. Are the teachers ready? I don't think this should be taught by teachers, or teachers should be telling my child. I don't think the school administration should be telling my child, and certainly not the government. No, I don't believe that. It should be strictly between a parent and a child. Now, kindergartner teachers, they're the hardest working teachers. I've seen them. They go above and beyond. They're not just there to teach. They're doing a lot more. But let me ask you this. Are they ready? Are they prepared to answer all the confusing questions that will follow after the class has been taught? These kids are confused. They're awkward positions. They are going to ask a question in front of a room full of other kids. They don't raise their hands, even though if they know the answer in a, let's say, math or science. You really think they're going to ask questions to the teachers? They will come back home. And guess what? Again, we have to undo the things that they are going to be taught in school. There has to be a different way where we as parents should have the capacity, should have the power to teach our kids, not the government. Now also, the society needs to support and love and respect all students equally. I do believe that. And I respect all who have already identified themselves. I love them. And kids as young as 5, 6, and 7-year-olds do not remember to bring home their lunch boxes. Do not remember to bring home their winter jackets. Are you telling me that they will remember everything that you are imposing? You're putting it out there in the curriculum. Do you really think they're going to remember all of this? I don't know. I think there are much more different ways to teach them. But you know what? To teach them many ways to express gender in school is definitely not the right way to go, not in my opinion. Children in 4th grade will be told that they can choose their sexual orientation. Are we talking about the same kids who have difficulty choosing between a golf lesson and a swimming lesson? Like my kids have always debated like, oh no, I wanted to go to a swimming lesson, but I can't choose. But you're asking them to be able to choose for their own identity? Really? How is that gonna happen? For a mother, it's very painful for me to see that the kids are going to go through this. My grandkids are going to go through this. Kids get confused by the pressure, the peer pressure by the friends. You know, if one time my daughter wants to do ballet, does she really want to do ballet? But she's doing it because the other kids are doing it. So anything that's being taught, some different things by different teachers, don't you think one child will just turn around and say, oh, I want to follow that child, maybe I can question my own identity? I don't think there's something that we can just go on, yes, it's a law, but do you not think as parents we should question it? Don't you think we should have an answers? Don't you think as parents we should be asked our opinion? How do we feel? We all come from different backgrounds. We have different values. Different society thinks it differently. Just in my house, there are different rules for a boy and different rules for a girl. So does that mean they're all ready? I don't think so. Students these days, you know, this will lead to a very serious anxiety problem. Mental health will be an issue for this one. I don't see how the government doesn't see what they're doing. They're damaging the kids in upcoming future. Now, students these days, they do not even know how to select an elective. They do not even know how to select a major in college. They go undecided. Yes, I have raised 2 kids. They've gone through the college system. And I know for a fact, a lot of their friends, they went to college undecided. So a child who can't even decide what major to pick by the time they are finished with high school, they are expected, kids are expected to know, understand, and realize all of this in kindergarten, in 1st grade, 2nd grade. I don't think so. I think the parents should have the power. Government should let it at the discretion of the individual, the family, and the parents to decide what's right and when it's right for the kids. That's what I believe. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, powerful indeed. In fact, all the women I share the panel with today are very powerful in their statements and their conviction on this issue. What I do want to point out about Rosie, she doesn't just talk the talk, she's walked the walk. In her hometown, she has served as a member of the Board of Education for 12 years. And I will tell you that serving on a local Board of Education is tougher than any governor's job. I will tell you that. So we applaud you for your service.
It's actually Special Education PTA and the PTA Board.
Thank you all the same. But again, this is the heartbreaking element, the story that Rosie tells. I will tell you, as I've gone around the state, there have been a number of times because of the public school curriculum changes that we're discussing here today that I will look to repeal, is I've heard parents, particularly mothers, say that a young child came home questioning their sexuality, questioning their gender. If that's the consequence of what's being taught, that should tell us there's something terribly wrong with this curriculum. And it is too young an age to comprehend this kind of subject matter.
Sathika is our last panelist. If you want to say something, introduce yourself, and also I'd like to ask you a question after.
Absolutely. Generation immigrant here. And I have been through this public school system growing up. And so I've seen what has changed. And I tell you, my parents had it better. The challenges of raising my children in today's society with the influx of social media everything and anything under the sun easily available to our children, it is detrimental to the child's well-being in many ways, because it's a lot of information that they are not ready to process. And I wonder how it's going to be moving forward for their kids, because we have to look forward. But whatever we need to do today starts at very grassroots level of change. And that's change in your choices of policies, is change in your choices of elected officials, and change in understanding the diversity that is multiplying and accepting it and including it in a manner that works for your family values. And that is key. I feel that this administration in New Jersey today is very disillusioned with what New Jersey is all about. And that breaks my heart. And like I said, when you grow up here, you see the change. And sometimes that change is not good. And that does hurt me as a parent, as a person, as an American citizen. And I feel like their policy is a very diluted version of diversity and inclusion. You see, value systems are very unique. They're very beautiful ideas. So if you incorporate them in the right way, everybody's already included. And they're beautiful. You don't have to change anything about that. And having a tunnel vision of a one-size-fits-all policy, this isn't a t-shirt. These are kids we're talking about. So you cannot do that to the future New Jerseyans, our children, and you cannot put parents through that type of feeling of powerlessness with the system flowing in a direction that they cannot control. It's not fair, and I feel that schools are a place where they should teach skill sets and mathematics and all the unique ideas and innovation. Family values are to be left for the home, because we are still a society that will not talk loud in front of our children. We will have our conversations behind closed doors so that they may not affect our children. So this is unacceptable, that we are allowing them to experience all this information plus some, like I said, social media, and it's not right. We are actually playing with the minds of the future generation, and that is wrong in every capacity. I hope and I pray that Jack Ciattaralli becomes our future governor. I am excited. He has not just 200, 300% my support, and I am looking forward to November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sadika. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Is there a statement? Because we're going to close this panel, and if you have any closing remarks, and then we're going to hand it over to Jack for some closing remarks.
Well, of course, I would like to thank Jack for coming and being part of this panel and listening to our concerns on behalf of AHC and the South Asian community and other member communities that have participated, the media. I would like to also, thank Preeti for her assistance in pulling this together. Thank you. And I would like to say that this is a very important matter, and everybody should be concerned and keep that date in mind. Don't miss it, because if you don't make that choice on November 2nd, we're going to have to deal with it for the next 4 years. So get out and vote.
Oh, before it goes to Jack, I just want to remind you that we actually have voting actually starts tomorrow. So we actually are doing early voting. So please, everyone, go out starting tomorrow up until it's 10-day voting, I believe, in advance. So
Right.
I think everyone's voice and votes will count. Right. So, Jack, I know that you are a family of immigrants, and you yourself have kids. You have 4 kids of your own. And so as a father, we want to ask you, what is the message that you want us to take home?
Well, first and foremost, thank you again for allowing me to be part of this panel and to share the discussion with 5 magnificent people, each of whom did a magnificent job representing their individual communities. But I think the concerns of all parents, it's not just your community you're speaking for today, but you are in the majority, I believe, of parents across the state that feel as we do with regard to the public school curriculum. I've said all along, and it gives me no great pleasure, it's a very sad that I say it, that I do believe this administration is very dangerous to children. Dangerous to children with regard to the public school curriculum, and we've discussed that today. Dangerous to children with regard to recreational marijuana. Dangerous to family with regard to, even in the case of teenage girls who may be pregnant. Phil Murphy doesn't believe that parents should be notified if a teenage girl is seeking an abortion. I've yet to find a parent across the state, Republican or Democrat, that supports that. We go with our children to get their tonsils taken out.
Yep.
But we're not going to be notified if our teenage daughter is seeking an abortion. This is dangerous. As a gubernatorial candidate, my focus is really very simple. Number one, we need to lower property taxes. Number two, we need to create more jobs by making New Jersey a better place to do business. Number three, we need to downsize a state government that's bloated, inefficient, and been corrupted by special interests. Number four, there needs to be safety in our community. We do that by having a governor that supports our local police. This governor has been anti-police. He and the Attorney General have not supported our local police departments. I and my Attorney General will. But my fifth area of focus is the public school curriculum. And I give you my word that I look forward to partnering with you to get our public school curriculum back to basics. It pains me greatly that parents today, particularly first-generation Americans who come here believing in the public school system, who are paying all those property taxes, cannot send their children off to school with confidence that the school system and the school curriculum is doing right by their students and respecting that particular family and that particular culture within that family and that community. And so under Governor Ciattaralli, we certainly will do that. And I thank you all for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And again, I want to wish all the panelists, thank you so much. You guys have done an amazing job. We actually were preparing for this, and some of you actually came in last minute. But you know what? This is what we represent and more of. As Jack had said, New Jersey is just a very diverse community. And I think that for kindergartners, I think we should start by teaching them how to be good human beings and how to have good morals. And I think we should start there as kindergartners, because, you know, foundation is started at by the time you're 5 years old and up. We need to set our foundation with our kids so that they grow up to be like you all here. So again, thank you so much. And thank you, American Hindu Coalition. We have Sadika and we have here that represent the organization. They actually are the ones that brought this to our attention and had taken initiative to do the panel. So thank you so much. Sadika, they're a Washington-based organization, as Sadika had mentioned. So please go back and tell the rest of the team that you guys did an awesome job, and we really appreciate everything that you guys did.
Indian American values are Republican values with regard to family, education, low taxes, and business ownership. And so I ask for the vote of the Indian American community. My focus as governor is very simple. 1, we need to lower property taxes. 2, we need to create more jobs by making New Jersey a better place to do business. 3, you need me to reduce the size and cost of state government and make it more responsive to the needs of its citizens. Number 4, we need to support our local police. Governor Murphy has not supported our local police, and that's why crime is up across New Jersey. I and my Attorney General will always support the local police. And number 5, we need to get back to basics in our public school system in teaching our students critical life skills and provide vocational training for those students that don't want or need to go to college. And we'll leave other subject matter for the kitchen table at home between parents and their children. We'll respect parental rights and the various cultures around the state that find the new public school curriculum so very offensive and dangerous. So I ask for your vote this election season. November 2nd is Election Day. Vote for Jack Ciattaralli.